Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Schwob Percussion Ensemble retrospective concert featuring the life and music of American musical pioneer George Hamilton Green. The first piece you heard, entitled Dottie Dimples, featured our soloist Lucas White from Loganville. Yeah. Now that was in an arrangement by Bill Kahn of the famed percussion ensemble Nexus, who are credited with finding and reviving George Hamilton Green's music in the early 1970s. Now, Dottie Dimples was originally performed and recorded for dancing in 1920 for the Victor Talking Machine Company in New York City by the all-star trio of George Hamilton Green, Wheeler Wadsworth on piano, and Victor Arden on saxophone. It's a classic up-tempo rag with fun, syncopated offbeat rhythms in the accompaniment and featuring, as you saw, virtuosic improvisatory writing in the xylophone part. Our second piece, entitled Jovial Jasper, a slow drag, was published in 1926 as a xylophone solo with piano accompaniment. George Green recorded this work with his duo partner, pianist Frank Banta, for the Columbia label that same year. Now, a slow drag was a notorious couple dance, usually done to music with a blues character and medium tempo, typically with the female dancer literally hanging by both hands around the neck of her partner. Our performance today will feature Logan Gordy from Smith Station. Log Cabin Blues, also subtitled Blue Foxtrot, was published in 1924 as one of 6 novelty foxtrots with piano accompaniment grouped under the title George Hamilton Green's Jazz Classics for the Xylophone. The earliest recording of this piece by George Green dates back to 1919 and featured a band accompaniment. A subsequent recording with pianist Frank Banta was released in 1925 on Edison Records. This arrangement of the original piano version for 4 marimbas by Nexus member and xylophone virtuoso Bob Becker will feature Aston Charles from Detroit, Michigan. The next piece, Nola, is one of only 2 works performed today not originally composed by Green. American composer and pianist Felix Arndt's biggest hit was written as an engagement piece 10 months before his wedding to Nola Locke. She was also a composer, singer, and teacher who traveled as soloist with the St. Louis Symphony. Nola was a keyboard novelty and was published in 1916. The piano solo caught on very quickly, and lyrics were later added to a simplified version of the piece. A foxtrot arrangement in the early 1920s was also published. Later on, orchestra leader Vincent Lopez, also a popular pianist, made it the theme for his radio show in the 1930s. Nola was later recorded by guitar legend Les Paul in a multi-tracked arrangement featuring electric guitars and became a top 10 hit in 1950. Today's performance of an arrangement by Nexus member Bill Kahn will feature Byron, Georgia native Jack McKever. So the next work on our program has nothing to do with George Hamilton Green at all, actually. Chain by Japanese composer Kazunori Miyake, entitled Chain, will feature soloist Sebastian Okando on the marimba who will be competing in the Percussive Arts Society International Convention Marimba competition this coming week in Indianapolis. George Hamilton Green was a xylophonist, composer, arranger, and cartoonist. Born in Omaha, Nebraska in May of 1893 into a very musical family. His grandfather, Joseph Green, was a violinist and violin maker in New York City who later moved to Omaha to become the conductor and baritone soloist for the Seventh Ward Silver Cornet Band. In 1889, George Hamilton Green's father took over that same band and as conductor, arranger, cornet soloist, performing weekly concerts to audiences of 7,000 to 10,000 people throughout the 1890s. Now, George Green Jr. was a prodigious talent and was considered a prodigy on piano and violin as early as age 4. He made his first xylophone himself as a boy in Omaha, and by the time he was 9, made his first solo appearances with his father's band. By the time he was 11, he was already being called the world's greatest xylophonist and was acclaimed as such wherever he performed. His repertoire, while still a boy, consisted of well over 300 standard overtures, Hungarian rhapsodies, violin showpieces and concertos, and concert piano selections. He entered vaudeville at the age of 19, and by 1915, at the age of 22, a review in the United States Musician, which was a renowned New York City musical publication, stated, "He has begun where every other xylophone player left off. His touch, his attack, his technique, and his powers of interpretation in the rendition of his solos being far different than any other performer. To say his work is marvelous and wonderful would not fully express it." Now, typical of the reviews written about George Green at the time, his performances on the concert stage, vaudeville, recording, and early radio elevated the xylophone to where it was recognized as a legitimate concert instrument. The next piece that you will hear, let me see, is entitled Spanish Waltz. In 1936, Carl Fischer published a series of 8 xylophone solos with piano accompaniment by George Green. Now, according to copyright registration records, at least 5 other pieces were composed in 1927 or earlier. And some of them included Hummingbird, Caprice Valsant, Gavotte, and Spanish Waltz. Now, 4 of these works were recorded with his favorite piano accompanist, Frank Banta, in 1927 on Edison, with 2 others being included in an electronically processed reissue entitled The Xylophone Genius of George Hamilton Green back in 1971. Now, these compositions represent the earliest serious and idiomatic contribution to xylophone repertoire, and it is appropriate that they came from one of the greatest players of all time. Although written in a light classical style, these pieces are nevertheless elegantly structured and clearly display Green's gift for melodic and harmonic invention. Soloist Sebastian Oquendo comes to us from Maracaibo, Venezuela, and is a great admirer of soccer legend Lionel Messi, as is Diego. All right, this is Spanish Waltz. George Green recorded his first solo record for the Edison Company in 1916. Already very popular by 1917, he and his brothers Joe and Lou Green were hired as the original sound crew for Walt Disney's first 3 cartoons, which included Steamboat Willie in 1928. He was one of the most recorded artists in history, with thousands of titles with numerous groups, which included the All-Star Trio, the Green Brothers Xylophone Orchestra, the Green Brothers Novelty Band, the Imperial Marimba Band, and the American Republic Band. Green was also a fine teacher and author of pedagogical materials. His course of 50 lessons for the xylophone is still considered one of the primary textbooks for mallet study. Some of the most famous students include Red Norvo and Lionel Hampton. The next work was first written and published as a piano rag in 1906 by composer Charles Johnson and entitled Dill Pickle's Rag. It was later recorded and released by country guitar legend Chet Atkins. Our soloist Gary Gordon, who also loves dill pickles, by the way, hails from Norcross, Georgia, where he studied percussion in high school with Schwob School of Music alum Corey Fair. George Green composed both the lyrics and music to Alabama Moon in 1920. It was quickly published by the Sam Fox Company and sold for over 1 million copies in just 6 months. Written in a nostalgic style of a southern waltz, the words and melody convey a popular idiom of the 1920s. Green first arranged this piece for Hawaiian guitars at xylophone and recorded it in 1920 with the Hawaiian Trio for the Victor Company. The evocative chorus lyrics are worth hearing. Alabama moon, coming out so soon, shining through the trees where evening breezes gently croon, cotton fields of white, swaying in the night, dreaming of an Alabama moon. Swaying and dreaming behind the xylophone. Our next soloist, Isaac Tormey, comes to us from Loganville, Georgia. George Hamilton Green recorded for virtually every label at the time until his retirement from performing in 1946, just a few years after his brother Joe passed away. The story goes that one day, during his weekly 1-hour live radio show at Radio City Music Hall, he called over one of his students during a performance and walked away, never returned, not even to get his instruments. He shortly thereafter moved to upstate New York and pursued a successful career in cartooning as an artist and illustrator. George Hamilton Green died in 1970, just before the rediscovery of his music by members of the Nexus Percussion Ensemble. He was inducted into the Percussive Arts Society Hall of Fame in 1983. The last piece on the program, Charleston Capers, was never published during his lifetime. In any way, he filed a manuscript copy of the xylophone part with the Library of Congress in 1926. The same year, he recorded a fantastic performance of the piece with duo partner, pianist Frank Banta for Columbia Records. The xylophone part of the Bob Becker and Nexus arrangement you're about to hear is essentially an edited copy of Green's original manuscript, except for the improvised repetitions of each section, which were a transcription from a Nexus and Bob Becker performance. Now, the Charleston is a dance named for the city, Charleston, South Carolina. The rhythm was popularized in mainstream dance music in the United States by a 1923 tune called The Charleston by composer-pianist James P. Johnson, which originated in the Broadway show Running Wild and became one of the most popular hits of the decade. Now, you will hear quotes of the original tune throughout the piece. We're going to play a little bit of that for you. C3, let's play first 6 measures of that. Ready? So you've all heard that tune before, very popular, yeah? Today's soloist, Angel Valenzuela, comes from Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, where he also performed with Schwob alum and former Woodruff Award winner Ramiro Compres in the National Symphony Orchestra of the Dominican Republic. It has been our pleasure to perform for you today, and we hope you've enjoyed your time with us. So this is the last piece on the program, Charleston Capers.